The emergency klaxon screamed through the corridors of the GSS Harmony, its red warning lights painting the pristine white walls in bloody shadows. Princess Zara of the Kytherian Empire pressed her back against the cold metal bulkhead, her forearms clutching the portable shield generator that flickered weakly with each impact from the Void Hunter's plasma rifles. Her royal guard lay scattered around the escape pod bay, their elegant ceremonial armor now twisted metal coffins. Captain Vex, her personal bodyguard for the past 50 cycles, had used his final breath to shove her toward the emergency pods. The memory of his crystalline eyes going dark still burned in her mind. The ship groaned around her, its hull buckling under the relentless assault. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, she could see the Void Hunter's vessels, sleek, black predators that moved through space like hungry shadows. Their technology was beyond anything the Galactic Council had encountered, their motives unknown except for their apparent desire to harvest the life force of sentient beings. Zara's diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim had been meant to establish trade relations with the newly discovered human colonies. Instead, she had led her entire delegation into a trap. The guilt sat heavy in her chest, a weight that made breathing difficult in the recycled air of the dying ship. She activated her personal communicator with trembling fingers. The device's screen showed her location deep within the Crimson Nebula, where space itself seemed wrong. The nebula's exotic radiation interfered with most technology, making rescue nearly impossible. Even if someone received her distress signal, no sane captain would risk their crew in this cursed region of space. "This is Princess Zara of House Altair," she whispered into the device, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "My ship has been attacked by unknown hostiles. I am transmitting my coordinates on all emergency frequencies. Tell my mother." She paused, her throat tight. "Tell my mother I tried to serve our people with honor." The ship shuddered violently, and she heard the distinct sound of hull plating being torn away. The Void Hunters were boarding. Their previous attacks had shown they preferred to take their victims alive, feeding on their terror before the final harvest. Zara had seen the recordings from other worlds, entire populations reduced to empty husks, their life essence drained to power the invaders' twisted technology. She sealed herself into the escape pod, her hands moving through the launch sequence with practiced efficiency. As the pod's door cycled shut, she caught a glimpse of shapes moving through the smoke-filled corridor outside. The Void Hunters had arrived. The pod ejected from the dying ship with a violent lurch, its tiny engine struggling against the nebula's gravitational anomalies. Through the rear viewport, Zara watched the Harmony's final moments. The great diplomatic vessel, pride of the Kytherian fleet, crumpled like paper in the grip of invisible forces. The Void Hunters' ships circled the wreckage like carrion birds, their scanning beams searching for survivors. Her pod's stealth systems engaged automatically, wrapping the small craft in a shroud of sensor-dampening fields. It was military-grade technology, designed to hide from conventional detection methods. But, as the Void Hunters turned their attention to the escape trajectory, Zara realized their sensors operated on principles the Council had never encountered. 3 of the black ships broke formation, moving toward her location with predatory grace. Her pod's computer estimated 12 minutes before they would be within weapons range. The small craft's defensive systems were designed for debris and micrometeorites, not combat with advanced alien vessels. Zara's mind raced through her options. The pod's emergency beacon was already transmitting, broadcasting her location and identity on all frequencies. But rescue would take hours, assuming anyone was brave enough to enter the nebula. She had minutes at most. The first plasma bolt struck the pod's shields, sending a jolt through the tiny craft that threw her against the padded walls. The shield generators whined in protest, their power levels dropping rapidly. Another hit, and another. The Void Hunters were toying with her, like a cat playing with wounded prey. She activated the pod's limited communication array, pushing the transmitter to maximum power despite the risk of burning out the components. If she was going to die here, at least her final words might reach someone. "To any vessel receiving this transmission," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is Princess Zara of the Kytherian Empire, identification code Theta-77 Alpha. I am under attack by hostiles in the Crimson Nebula, coordinates attached. My escort has been destroyed. I do not expect to survive, but I hope this information reaches the Council. The threat these beings represent cannot be ignored." Another plasma bolt impacted the pod, and warning lights flashed across the control panel. Hull integrity was down to 60% and falling. The life support system flickered, its steady hum becoming an irregular stutter. She closed her eyes, thinking of her mother waiting in the Crystal Palace of Kytheria Prime. Empress Mira had been reluctant to approve this mission, sensing danger in the unexplored regions beyond Council space. Zara had convinced her it was necessary, that their people needed new allies and trading partners to remain strong. Now her mother would pay the price for her daughter's ambition. The communication array crackled with static, the nebula's interference growing stronger as the Void Hunters closed distance. But, through the electronic noise, Zara heard something impossible, a response. "Princess, this is Sergeant Jake Morrison, Terran Defense Corps, operating out of Mining Station Beta 7. I'm reading your distress beacon and moving to assist. Hold tight, Your Highness. Help is on the way." Zara's four eyes widened in shock. The voice was human, speaking in accented standard with the flat, clipped tones of someone accustomed to military communications. But, what was a human soldier doing in this remote part of space? The newest members of the Galactic Council barely had the technology for interplanetary travel, let alone deep space operations in regions like the Crimson Nebula. "Human vessel, be advised," she transmitted back, her voice urgent. "I am being pursued by 3 hostile ships of unknown configuration. Their weapons and technology are far advanced beyond Council standards. You should not attempt rescue. Save yourself and warn the Council of the threat." The response came back immediately, tinged with something that might have been amusement. "Ma'am, with respect, I didn't ask for a tactical assessment. I asked you to hold tight. These particular hostiles and I have some unfinished business." The communication cut to static as another plasma bolt struck her pod dead center. The shields collapsed entirely, and the pod's hull began to glow cherry red from the energy discharge. Emergency systems screamed warnings as life support started to fail. Atmosphere vented through microscopic cracks in the hull plating, and the temperature began to drop rapidly. Zara strapped herself into the acceleration couch, her hands moving automatically through the procedures for catastrophic pod failure. Her training had covered this scenario, but always as a theoretical exercise. The reality was far more terrifying than any simulation. Through the forward viewport, she could see the 3 Void Hunter ships approaching in perfect formation. Their hulls seemed to absorb light, making them appear as moving holes in space itself. Weapon ports glowed along their sides, charging for what would certainly be the killing blow. But, then, something impossible happened. A 4th shape emerged from behind a floating chunk of debris, angular where the Void Hunters were curved, solid where they were shadow. It was smaller than the alien vessels but moved with a purposeful aggression that spoke of experienced hands at the controls. The human ship opened fire without warning, sending streams of bright projectiles toward the nearest Void Hunter. The alien vessel's shields flared and sparked under the impact, its perfect formation suddenly broken as it veered away from the unexpected assault. Zara watched in amazement as the human craft dove between the Void Hunters, its weapons systems blazing. Whatever technology the humans were using, it seemed to bypass the aliens' defensive measures with devastating effect. The lead Void Hunter ship staggered under a concentrated barrage, its sleek hull cracking and venting atmosphere. "Princess, I'm painting a docking beacon on your pod," came Morrison's voice through the static. "When I give the word, activate your emergency thrusters and burn toward the beacon. Don't stop, don't look back, and, whatever you do, don't let go of something solid when we dock. This is going to get rough." The human ship spun through a series of maneuvers that defied everything Zara knew about aerospace dynamics. It moved like a fighter, but its hull configuration suggested a much larger vessel. How was it possible for something so bulky to move with such precision? The second Void Hunter had recovered from its initial surprise and was now targeting the human vessel with focused plasma beams. But Morrison's ship seemed to anticipate every attack, rolling and diving through space with an intuitive grace that suggested the pilot was operating on pure instinct. "Now, Princess. Move." Zara slammed her hand down on the thruster controls, feeling the pod's engines kick to life with a violence that pressed her deep into the couch. The little craft shot forward like a bullet, racing toward the docking beacon that painted a bright green target on her display. Behind her, the battle continued with an intensity that lit up the nebula's exotic gases in brilliant colors. The human ship was clearly outgunned, but its pilot seemed to understand something about the Void Hunters that the rest of the galaxy had missed. Every movement was calculated, every attack precisely timed to exploit weaknesses that shouldn't have existed. The pod's docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang that echoed through the tiny craft. Magnetic fields grabbed hold, and, suddenly, Zara was being pulled toward the human vessel with an acceleration that made her stomach lurch. Through the pod's rear camera, she watched the third Void Hunter explode in a brilliant flash of exotic energy as Morrison's weapons found their mark. The surviving alien ships began to retreat, their formation broken and their confidence shattered. Whatever they had expected to find in the nebula, it wasn't a human soldier with enough firepower to challenge their technological superiority. As the pod sealed into the docking bay of Morrison's ship, Zara felt the artificial gravity take hold. For the first time since the attack began, she was truly safe. But questions burned in her mind. Who was this human who fought like he knew the Void Hunters personally? What was he doing in the most dangerous region of known space? And how had he managed to drive off enemies that had decimated one of the Council's most advanced warships? The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and Princess Zara of the Kytherian Empire prepared to meet the human who had just saved her life. The airlock finished its cycle with a mechanical sigh, and Princess Zara stepped into what could only be described as organized chaos. The human vessel's interior looked nothing like the sleek, sterile corridors of Council ships. Exposed conduits ran along the walls, their surfaces scarred by hasty repairs and jury-rigged modifications. The air smelled of metal, ozone, and something else she couldn't identify, something organic and distinctly human. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across bulkheads that bore the scars of combat. Blast marks scorched the metal around what had obviously been emergency patches. This wasn't a military vessel by any standard she recognized. It looked more like a mining ship that had been converted for war by someone with limited resources but unlimited determination. "Your Highness." The voice belonged to a figure emerging from the shadows at the far end of the corridor. Sergeant Jake Morrison was nothing like what she had expected from the diplomatic briefings on humanity. Where the files described humans as small, fragile beings barely adapted for their own gravity, well, Morrison stood nearly as tall as a Kytherian and moved with the fluid confidence of a born predator. His uniform was a patchwork of military surplus and improvised armor plating. A plasma rifle hung across his back, its design clearly human but modified with components she didn't recognize. Most striking were his eyes, pale blue and utterly calm despite having just fought a running battle with some of the most dangerous beings in known space. "Sergeant Morrison," she replied, inclining her head in the formal greeting between allies. "I owe you my life. But, I must ask, what is a human soldier doing in the Crimson Nebula? The briefings indicated your people barely had the technology for interstellar travel." Morrison's weathered face cracked into what might have been a smile. "Ma'am, those briefings are about 6 months out of date. We've had some upgrades." He gestured for her to follow him deeper into the ship. "Right now, though, we need to get you somewhere safe. Those Void Hunters will be back, and next time they'll bring friends." As they walked through the corridors, Zara couldn't help but study the modifications Morrison had made to his vessel. Energy conduits had been rerouted to support what looked like experimental shield generators. Weapons ports had been cut through the hull plating and fitted with guns that combined human ballistic technology with exotic energy systems she didn't recognize. "This ship," she said, running one of her 4 hands along a particularly impressive weapons mount. "You built this yourself?" "Rebuilt is more accurate," Morrison replied, his voice carrying a note of pride. "She started life as a deep space mining platform. The Aurora class was designed to operate in hazardous environments, so she had good bones. I just gave her some teeth." They entered what had once been the ship's main cargo bay, now converted into a combination armory and workshop. Weapons of various designs hung from magnetic clamps along the walls, human projectile weapons alongside energy rifles of clearly alien origin. A workbench dominated the center of the space, its surface covered with partially disassembled technology that seemed to combine multiple species' engineering principles. "You're studying their technology," Zara observed, her trained eye recognizing components that could only have come from Void Hunter ships. "How long have you been fighting them?" Morrison's expression darkened. "About 8 months now. They hit the mining colony where I was stationed, Beta 7. Took everyone except the skeleton crew that was underground when they arrived." He picked up what looked like a Void Hunter energy cell, turning it over in his hands with familiar ease. "I was the only soldier on the station. Just supposed to be providing security for the miners and their families." The weight of loss in his voice was something Zara recognized. She had heard the same tone from survivors of Void Hunter attacks across the galaxy, a hollow quality that spoke of watching loved ones die while being powerless to stop it. The council evacuated the survivors to safer systems, she said gently. The mining operations in this sector were deemed too dangerous to continue.
Yeah, well, the council doesn't know everything.
Morrison set the energy cell down carefully. These things, the Void Hunters, they're not just random raiders.
They're systematic. Organized.
And they're using this nebula as a staging ground for something bigger. He activated a holographic display that showed the local star system in 3 dimensions. Red markers indicated known Void Hunter sightings, forming a pattern that made Zara's blood run cold. The attacks weren't random at all, they were closing in on the core worlds of the Galactic Council in a carefully planned spiral.
You've been tracking their movements, she breathed, studying the tactical display. This is intelligence the Council needs to see immediately.
I've been trying to get their attention for months, Morrison said with obvious frustration. But, apparently the word of one human soldier doesn't carry much weight with galactic government. Every report I file gets buried in bureaucracy or dismissed as unreliable. The ship's communication system crackled to life, interrupting their conversation. Morrison moved to the control panel with practiced ease, his fingers dancing across interface systems that had been modified beyond their original specifications.
Sergeant Morrison, this is Mining Station Beta 7, came a voice heavy with static. We're reading massive energy signatures in your sector. Are you all right? Morrison keyed the transmit button. Beta 7, this is Morrison. I'm fine.
Managed to rescue a council VIP who got caught by the hunters.
Transmitting her credentials now.
There was a pause before the voice returned, audibly shocked. Sir, our computers are showing Princess Zara of the Kytherian Empire.
Is that accurate? That's affirmative, Beta 7.
And she needs immediate transport to Council space.
Morrison looked at Zara apologetically.
Ma'am, my ship's fast but she wasn't built for long-range passenger transport.
Beta 7 has a diplomatic courier that can get you home safely. Zara felt a stab of disappointment that surprised her.
After months of diplomatic meetings with beings who saw her only as a political symbol, Morrison's straightforward honesty was refreshing.
What about you, Sergeant? Will you come with us?
Your intelligence about the Void Hunters could change everything.
Morrison shook his head. Can't do that, Your Highness. Someone needs to keep an eye on their activities out here. Monitor their patterns, gather intel, hit them when opportunities present themselves.
He gestured toward the weapons hanging on the walls.
Besides, I've got a job to finish. The princess studied his face, reading the determination there.
This human had turned himself into a one-man intelligence operation in the most dangerous region of space, operating without support or backup from his own government. It was either the act of a madman or someone with an unbreakable sense of duty. The mining station, she said suddenly.
You're still protecting it, aren't you?
Even though it's been officially evacuated.
Morrison's slight smile confirmed her suspicion.
Beta 7's been my home for 3 years. The miners are good people, they didn't deserve what happened to them.
And, the station's position gives me a perfect observation post for Void Hunter activity.
You're operating alone, Zara realized.
One human against an entire invasion fleet.
Not alone, Morrison corrected. The station's automated systems are still functional, and I've made some improvements to the defensive grid. Plus, I've got allies in the area, other people who've lost family and friends to these bastards. We share information, coordinate strikes when we can. The communication system chirped again.
Sergeant Morrison, this is Captain Chen aboard the diplomatic courier Serenity. I'm inbound to your position for passenger transfer. ETA 20 minutes. Copy that, Serenity. The package is secure and ready for transport. As they waited for the courier's arrival, Morrison showed Zara more of his intelligence-gathering operation.
Hidden sensors throughout the nebula fed information back to the mining station, creating a real-time map of Void Hunter movements. He had identified their supply routes, documented their ship classifications, even recorded examples of their technology in action. This is a complete tactical profile, Zara said, scrolling through the data with growing amazement. You've learned more about them in 8 months than the Council's intelligence services have managed in 2 years. Helps when you're actually willing to get close to them, Morrison replied. Most Council ships run at the first sign of contact. Hard to gather intelligence when you're burning for the hyperspace limit.
The courier ship arrived precisely on schedule, its sleek hull bearing the diplomatic seals of the Galactic Council.
Captain Chen was a veteran spacer from the Terran Defense Corps, his weathered face showing the same competence that Zara had come to associate with humans who worked in dangerous environments.
Your Highness, Chen said with a respectful bow. It's an honor to meet you. The Council's been searching for your ship since your distress beacon went silent.
Captain, before we depart, you need to review Sergeant Morrison's intelligence files, Zara said urgently. What he's discovered about the Void Hunters could save thousands of lives.
Chen's expression grew serious as Morrison transferred the data to the courier's computers.
The captain studied the information for several minutes, his face growing more grim with each revelation.
Sweet Mother of Earth, he whispered finally. Sergeant, this shows a full-scale invasion in progress. Why hasn't this reached the Council? Because nobody listens to humans, Morrison said bluntly. We're the new kids in the galactic community. Our word doesn't carry the same weight as species that have been around for millennia. Captain Chen looked between Morrison and the princess, understanding dawning in his eyes. But, if Princess Zara endorses the intelligence, then, the Council will have to take it seriously, Zara finished. She turned to Morrison, her expression intense. Sergeant, I'm prepared to stake my royal house's reputation on the accuracy of your information. Will you let me carry this to the Council? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying her face.
Your Highness, if I give you this data and you present it to the Council, they're going to want to send a fleet into the nebula.
That means a lot of good people are going to die fighting these things.
And if we do nothing, a lot more people will die when the Void Hunters reach the core worlds, Zara replied. You've given us a chance to meet them on our terms instead of theirs. That's the greatest gift you could offer the galaxy.
Morrison nodded slowly.
In that case, Your Highness, I'd be honored to have you carry our intelligence to the Council. He handed her a data crystal containing everything he had learned about the Void Hunters.
Tell him Jake Morrison sends his regards, and that humanity doesn't abandon its allies.
As the princess prepared to transfer to the courier ship, she found herself reluctant to leave. This human soldier had shown her something she hadn't expected, that sometimes the greatest heroes were found in the most unlikely places, doing thankless jobs with no recognition or reward. Sergeant, she said as they reached the airlock. What you're doing out here, it won't be forgotten.
I'll make sure of that. Morrison's smile was genuine this time. Just doing my job, ma'am. Same as you. As the courier ship pulled away from Morrison's modified mining vessel, Princess Zara watched through the viewport until the human ship disappeared into the exotic clouds of the Crimson Nebula.
The lone human was returning to his vigil, continuing his private war against an enemy that threatened everything she held dear. She clutched the data crystal tightly in one of her hands, knowing that it contained more than just intelligence about the Void Hunters. It contained proof that humanity's true strength wasn't in their technology or their numbers, but in their absolute refusal to surrender when defending something they believed in. The journey to Council space would take 3 days. During that time, she would need to prepare for the most important presentation of her political career. The fate of the galaxy might very well depend on her ability to convince the Council that a lone human soldier in the depths of space had discovered the key to their survival. The crystal spires of Kytheria Prime gleamed like captured starlight as the diplomatic courier Serenity dropped out of hyperspace. Princess Zara pressed her face to the viewport, drinking in the sight of home after what felt like a lifetime in the cold darkness of the Crimson Nebula. The planet's twin moons hung like pearls against the deep purple of space, their surfaces covered with the sprawling cities that housed billions of her people. But, as beautiful as the homecoming was, Zara's mind remained focused on the data crystal hidden in her diplomatic pouch. Jake Morrison's intelligence about the Void Hunters burned in her thoughts like a secret fire. Every hour of delay could mean another world falling to the invisible invasion that was slowly strangling the galaxy. Your Highness, Captain Chen said from the pilot station, we're receiving clearance to dock at the Royal Spaceport. Your mother's staff has been alerted to your arrival. Zara nodded, straightening her travel robes and checking her appearance in the mirror. The past few days had been spent preparing her presentation to the Galactic Council, reviewing Morrison's data until she could recite every detail from memory. The evidence was overwhelming, but she knew that evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Politics in the council chamber required careful navigation of ancient alliances and carefully guarded pride. The courier ship settled into its berth with barely a whisper of displaced air. Through the docking tube's transparent walls, Zara could see the familiar faces of the royal guard waiting to escort her home. Their relief was visible even through their ceremonial helmets. The entire empire had been mourning her for dead. Commander Lyrics, captain of the Royal Guard, stepped forward as she emerged from the ship. His forearms moved in the traditional salute of greeting, but she could see the emotion beneath his professional composure. "Princess Zara," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "The Empress awaits your immediate presence in the private chambers. The entire court has been in prayer for your safe return." "Thank you, Commander. But, first, I need to schedule an emergency session with the Galactic Council representatives. The matter I bring cannot wait for normal diplomatic channels." Lyrics's expression showed surprise, but he bowed his acceptance. "Of course, Your Highness. I will have the communications staff contact the Council embassy immediately." The journey through the palace corridors felt surreal after her experiences in the nebula. Everything seemed too clean, too perfect, too removed from the brutal realities she had witnessed. Servants bowed as she passed, their faces showing joy at her return, but she found it difficult to smile in response. How could she celebrate when she carried knowledge of the storm approaching their peaceful world? Empress Mira waited in the family's private chambers, her usually composed demeanor cracking the moment Zara entered the room. The ruler of the Kytherian Empire crossed the space between them in quick steps, gathering her daughter in an embrace that spoke of fear finally released. "My child," the Empress whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "When your ship's distress beacon went silent, I feared the worst. The military advisors said the nebula was too dangerous for rescue operations." "Mother," Zara replied, holding her parent tightly, "I'm alive because of the courage of someone the galaxy has underestimated. We need to discuss what I learned during my captivity." They sat together on the cushioned benches overlooking the palace gardens, where exotic flowers from 100 worlds created a tapestry of color and fragrance. But Zara found no peace in the familiar beauty. The contrast between this serene paradise and the harsh realities of space made her mission feel even more urgent. "Tell me everything," Empress Mira said, her voice returning to the tone of a ruler receiving an intelligence briefing. Zara began with the attack on her diplomatic ship, describing the Void Hunters' overwhelming technological superiority and their systematic approach to the assault. She explained how her escape pod had been tracked through the nebula's interference, how rescue had seemed impossible. And then, she continued, a human soldier appeared. She told her mother about Jake Morrison, his modified mining ship, his months-long intelligence operation, his personal war against the beings that had destroyed his home. Most importantly, she described the data he had gathered about the Void Hunters' true purpose. Empress Mira listened in growing alarm as Zara outlined the invasion pattern Morrison had discovered. The seemingly random attacks across the galaxy were actually a coordinated campaign designed to isolate and weaken the Council's core worlds. The Void Hunters weren't just raiders or pirates, they were advanced scouts for something much larger and more terrible. "This human soldier," the Empress said when Zara finished her account, "he gave you proof of these claims?" Zara produced the data crystal, holding it up so the light from the gardens made it gleam like a tiny star. "Everything is here, Mother. Ship movements, attack patterns, technological analysis, even recordings of their weapons in action. Morrison has created the most complete intelligence profile of the enemy that anyone possesses. Yet he chose to remain in that dangerous region rather than bring this information himself," Mira observed. "Because he knows no one would listen to a human soldier making claims about galactic security," Zara said bitterly. "The Council sees humanity as a curiosity, interesting primitives who stumbled into space travel. They don't understand what humans are truly capable of when they're protecting something they care about." The Empress studied her daughter's face carefully. "You sound different, Zara. This experience has changed you." "It's shown me that strength and honor don't depend on advanced technology or ancient bloodlines," Zara replied. "Morrison saved my life with a rebuilt mining ship and salvaged weapons. But, more than that, he's been fighting a war the rest of us didn't even know was happening." Empress Mira was quiet for several minutes, weighing the implications of what she had heard. Finally, she spoke in the careful tones of a ruler making a decision that would affect millions of lives. "The emergency council session will be granted," she said. "But, Zara, you must understand the politics involved. If you present this intelligence and it proves incorrect, or if the council perceives it as human manipulation, the consequences will fall on our house," Zara finished. "I understand, Mother. But, if we do nothing and Morrison's intelligence proves accurate, those consequences will be measured in dead worlds instead of damaged reputations. The emergency session was scheduled for the following morning, giving Zara barely 12 hours to prepare for the most important speech of her life. She spent the night in her private study, reviewing Morrison's data and crafting her presentation. Every fact had to be perfect, every conclusion unassailable. As dawn broke over the crystal spires of the Capitol, representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the council's chamber. The great amphitheater filled with beings from dozens of species, some humanoid, others so alien that special environmental suits were required for their attendance. At the center sat the High Arbiters, the 5 most senior members who guided the council's decisions. Princess Zara entered the chamber wearing the formal diplomatic robes of her house, the data crystal secured in a place of honor at her throat. The whispered conversations died as she approached the speaker's podium, every eye in the vast room focused on the princess who had returned from the dead. High Arbiter Volthak, an ancient being whose crystalline body reflected the chamber's lights and prismatic patterns, spoke first.
Princess Zara of House Altair, the council rejoices in your safe return. We understand you bring urgent intelligence regarding the incidents in the Outer Rim.
Honored Arbiters, Zara began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I come before you with evidence of a threat that endangers every world under council protection. The attacks we have attributed to random raiders are actually part of a coordinated invasion by beings of unknown origin and devastating capability. She activated the holographic display system, projecting Morrison's tactical analysis for the entire council to see. The pattern of attacks formed a spiral that made several representatives gasp in recognition.
When viewed as a whole, the Void Hunter's strategy was undeniably clear.
This intelligence was gathered by Sergeant Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Corps, Zara continued, a human soldier who has spent 8 months conducting reconnaissance operations in the Crimson Nebula. His analysis shows that the enemy, which he designates as Void Hunters, are not raiders but advanced scouts preparing the way for a larger force. High Arbiter Cushion, a tall being with 6 arms and skin like polished metal, leaned forward in obvious skepticism. Princess, while we are grateful for your survival, we must question the reliability of intelligence gathered by a single individual from a species with limited spacefaring experience.
How can we trust such claims? The question Zara had been dreading.
She took a breath, knowing her next words would determine whether the galaxy prepared for war or continued in ignorant bliss. Because, honored arbiters, this human soldier saved my life at the cost of his own safety, and has continued risking himself to gather intelligence the rest of us were too afraid or too proud to seek. Her voice strengthened with conviction. I have personally witnessed both the enemy's capabilities and Sergeant Morrison's methods. His analysis is not only accurate but represents our only hope of mounting an effective defense. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives debated among themselves. Some voices called for immediate military action, others demanded additional verification. Through it all, Zara stood at the podium, watching the political machinery of the galaxy grind toward a decision that would affect billions of lives. High Arbiter Volthak raised one crystalline appendage, calling for order. Princess Zara, the Council appreciates your presentation of this intelligence. However, such claims require extensive verification before military resources can be committed. We will establish a fact-finding commission to investigate these allegations. With respect, honored arbiters, Zara said urgently, we may not have time for extended investigations.
Sergeant Morrison's projections suggest the enemy will move to the next phase of their operation within weeks.
Then, we must hope your human friend's analysis is as accurate as you claim, High Arbiter Kishin replied coldly. The Council will not commit to war based on the word of one soldier, regardless of his heroism in rescuing you. As the session dissolved into procedural discussions about the composition of the fact-finding commission, Zara felt the weight of failure settling on her shoulders. She had presented irrefutable evidence of a galactic threat, but politics and prejudice were preventing decisive action. Walking through the palace corridors afterward, she found herself thinking of Morrison alone in his modified mining ship, continuing his vigil in the dangerous depths of space. He had trusted her to carry his warning to the people who could act on it. Instead, she had delivered it to a committee. But, as she reached her chambers, a communication waited that would change everything. The message was from Captain Chen, still aboard the diplomatic courier that had brought her home. Your Highness, Chen's image said from the holographic display, I've just received an emergency transmission from Sergeant Morrison. 3 council worlds in the Helix sector have gone silent in the past 6 hours. Their last transmissions matched the signature of Void Hunter attacks. It appears his timeline was optimistic. The invasion had begun, and the galaxy's leaders were still forming committees to discuss whether the threat was real. Princess Zara looked at the data crystal Morrison had given her, knowing that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their diplomacy. It was their willingness to act when others would only debate. The emergency klaxons that screamed through the Galactic Council chambers carried a different tone than any Zara had heard before. These weren't practice alerts or minor diplomatic crises. These were the sounds of a civilization confronting its own mortality. 3 more worlds had gone silent during the night, their final transmissions confirming Jake Morrison's worst predictions. The Helix sector, once home to nearly 2 billion beings, now existed only as a collection of lifeless rocks orbiting dead stars. The Void Hunters had moved from subtle infiltration to open warfare, and the galaxy was learning the terrible cost of political hesitation. Princess Zara stood in the Council's emergency command center, watching tactical displays that painted a picture of systematic annihilation. High Arbiter Volthak's crystalline form reflected the red warning lights like a prism of blood, his previously calm demeanor replaced by something approaching panic. The defense fleets are reporting total communications blackout from the affected systems, Admiral Korex announced from his position at the tactical station. The veteran military commander's scales had darkened to the deep blue that indicated extreme stress among his species. No survivors, no escape pods, no debris fields. It's as if entire civilizations simply stopped existing. How is that possible? High Arbiter Kushin demanded, his 6 arms moving in agitated patterns. Even orbital bombardment leaves evidence. This level of destruction is exactly what Sergeant Morrison warned us about, Zara interrupted, her voice cutting through the chaos of overlapping conversations. The Void Hunters don't just destroy their targets. They harvest them. Every living being becomes fuel for their technology. The command center fell into uncomfortable silence as the implications sank in. These weren't conquests or even genocides in any traditional sense. They were harvesting operations, conducted with the efficiency of industrial agriculture. Admiral Korex brought up Morrison's intelligence files on the main display, the data Zara had presented just days earlier. The tactical analysis that had seemed alarmist during the peaceful debate now appeared prophetically accurate. The humans' projections show they'll hit the Centris cluster next, the Admiral said grimly. 47 inhabited worlds, including our primary shipbuilding facilities. If they follow their established pattern, we lose our ability to mount any meaningful resistance, High Arbiter Volthak finished. The outer worlds were just the beginning. They're clearing the way for an assault on the core systems. Zara stepped closer to the tactical display, studying the pattern of attacks with eyes that had seen the enemy firsthand. We need to contact Sergeant Morrison immediately. His intelligence network is our only real-time source of information about their movements. Princess, High Arbiter Kushin said carefully, even if this human's analysis has proven accurate, he's still just one individual with limited resources. What assistance could he possibly provide against a threat of this magnitude? Before Zara could respond, the communication system crackled with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged from the speakers was instantly recognizable, rough, calm, and utterly determined. Galactic Council Command, this is Sergeant Jake Morrison transmitting from Mining Station Beta 7. I'm reading massive fleet movements in the Crimson Nebula. The Void Hunters are mobilizing everything for a major offensive. You've got maybe 18 hours before they hit the Centris cluster. Admiral Korex leaned toward the transmitter. Sergeant Morrison, this is Admiral Korex commanding Council Defense Forces. Can you provide specific numbers on enemy strength? Admiral, I'm tracking approximately 300 vessels of various classifications. Their main force is built around what I'm calling dreadnoughts, ships roughly the size of your heavy cruisers but with firepower that makes them mobile planet killers. They're escorted by smaller craft that specialize in life harvesting operations. The numbers hit the command center like physical blows. The Council's entire defense fleet numbered less than 200 ships, many of which were scattered across the galaxy on patrol duties. Even if they could concentrate their forces in time, they would be facing a technologically superior enemy with numerical advantage. Sergeant, High Arbiter Volthak spoke directly into the transmitter, your analysis has proven tragically accurate. The Council formally requests your assistance in mounting a defense against this threat. Morrison's response carried a note of bitter amusement. With respect, honored arbiters, I'm one human with a modified mining ship. I'm not sure what kind of assistance you're expecting. Princess Zara moved to the transmitter, her heart pounding as she prepared to make a proposal that would either save the galaxy or destroy her political career.
Jake, this is Princess Zara. What if we could get you the resources you need? Ships, weapons, personnel trained in your tactics?
There was a long pause before Morrison replied, and, when he did, his voice carried a weight that spoke of possibilities being calculated and risks being measured. Your Highness, I've spent 8 months learning how these bastards think and fight. I know their weaknesses, their patterns, their technology. But, exploiting that knowledge requires a level of tactical flexibility that most military organizations can't achieve.
Explain, Admiral Corex demanded.
The Void Hunters rely on overwhelming technological superiority and precise coordination, Morrison continued. They expect their enemies to fight according to established military doctrine. But their sensors and targeting systems have blind spots, and their command structure has vulnerabilities that can be exploited by small, fast-moving units operating independently.
Admiral Corex studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. Guerrilla warfare.
Hit-and-run attacks designed to disrupt their coordination rather than engage in direct confrontation.
Exactly.
But it requires ships that can operate in the nebula's interference fields, crews willing to get close enough to these things to target their weak points, and commanders who can think like pirates instead of fleet officers. High Arbiter Volfax crystalline form chimed softly, the sound his species made when reaching a critical decision.
Sergeant Morrison, the Council hereby grants you emergency military authority to organize whatever resistance you deem necessary.
Our resources are at your disposal. I appreciate that, honored arbiters, but I don't need your entire fleet. What I need are volunteers, people crazy enough to fly into hell with me and disciplined enough to follow orders when everything goes sideways. Give me 50 ships with crews who understand that survival depends on speed and cunning, not firepower.
Princess Zara felt a chill of recognition. Morrison wasn't asking for an army.
He was asking for people willing to sacrifice themselves to buy time for evacuation efforts. It was a suicide mission disguised as a tactical operation. Jake, she said into the transmitter, I want to volunteer for your task force. The command center erupted in protest, with High Arbiter Kishin's voice rising above the others. Princess, you cannot seriously consider placing yourself under the command of a foreign soldier for what amounts to a desperate gamble.
I can and I am, Zara replied firmly.
I've seen what Sergeant Morrison can accomplish with limited resources. If anyone can find a way to stop these things, it's him. Morrison's voice cut through the argument. Your Highness, with respect, this isn't going to be a diplomatic mission.
I'm talking about close-quarters combat against an enemy that makes nightmares look friendly.
You'd be safer staying on your homeworld.
And watch billions die while I hide behind palace walls? Zara shook her head, even though Morrison couldn't see the gesture.
I've seen what the Void Hunters do to their victims, Jake.
I've seen what you're willing to do to stop them.
The least I can do is stand beside you when you make the attempt. Empress Myra's voice suddenly filled the command center as she entered unannounced, her royal robes rustling against the metal flooring. My daughter will not be participating in this operation, she declared with imperial authority. Mother Zara began, but the Empress continued speaking.
She will be leading it.
As a princess of the Kytherian Empire, she has the political authority to command volunteer forces from across the galaxy. Sergeant Morrison has the tactical knowledge, but Princess Zara has the rank to make other commanders listen.
The suggestion was so unexpected that even Morrison was silent for several seconds. When he finally responded, his tone carried grudging respect. Your Majesty, that might actually work.
A lot of good officers are going to volunteer for this, but they'll need someone they can take orders from without losing face. A royal commission would solve that problem.
Admiral Corex pulled up personnel files on the main display, highlighting ships and crews that met Morrison's operational requirements.
We can assemble your task force within 12 hours, but, Princess, you need to understand what you're volunteering for.
Even if this operation succeeds, casualties will be severe.
Admiral, Zara replied, if we don't try this, casualties will be absolute. Sergeant Morrison is offering us the only plan that gives civilians time to evacuate and the main fleet time to organize a proper defense.
Over the next few hours, volunteers began arriving from across the galaxy. Fighter pilots from the Terran Defense Corps who understood Morrison's unconventional tactics. Kytherian Royal Navy officers who served Princess Zara with absolute loyalty.
Free traders and mercenaries who had lost friends and family to Void Hunter raids. Even some former pirates who saw a chance to fight against something that made their own crimes look trivial. The task force that assembled at the emergency staging area was unlike anything in Galactic Council history, a mixture of military professionalism and criminal cunning, united only by their willingness to follow a human soldier into the depths of hell. Princess Zara stood on the bridge of the modified heavy cruiser that would serve as the task force flagship, watching the final preparations through the viewport. In 18 hours, she would either be dead or she would have helped save the galaxy. There seemed to be no middle ground. Morrison's voice crackled through the ship's communication system one final time before the operation began.
All task force vessels, this is Morrison.
In a few hours, we're going to do something that every tactical manual says is impossible. We're going to take on a technologically superior enemy in their home territory and make them hurt badly enough to think twice about their invasion plans. He paused, and, when he continued, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction.
Some of you are going to die today. That's the reality of what we're attempting.
But your sacrifice will give billions of innocent people a chance to live. In my book, that makes you all heroes, regardless of what happens next. As the task force prepared to jump into hyperspace toward the Crimson Nebula, Princess Zara found herself thinking about the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. A diplomatic mission had turned into a rescue operation, which had become an intelligence-gathering effort, which now culminated in a desperate gamble to save civilization itself. At the center of it all was Jake Morrison, a human soldier who had refused to abandon his post when everything logical said he should run. His example had inspired beings from across the galaxy to stand and fight when surrender seemed like the only rational choice. The hyperspace jump began with the familiar sensation of reality twisting around them. When it ended, they would be in the heart of enemy territory, outnumbered and outgunned, with nothing but courage and cunning to even the odds.
Princess Zara gripped the command chair's armrests and prepared to discover what humans meant when they said they never left anyone behind. The Crimson Nebula looked different when you knew you might die in it.
Princess Zara pressed her face to the bridge viewport of the task force flagship, watching the exotic clouds swirl with energies that played havoc with conventional sensors. Somewhere in that maze of twisted space and time, the largest Void Hunter fleet ever assembled was preparing to unleash hell on the galaxy's core worlds.
Task Force, this is Morrison, came the familiar voice through the communication system. We're approaching the operational zone. Remember, we're not here to win a stand-up fight.
We're here to break their coordination, cause enough chaos to delay their invasion, and give the evacuation fleets time to clear the civilian populations. The tactical display showed 53 ships in loose formation, ranging from modified fighters to Princess Zara's heavy cruiser. Each vessel had been retrofitted with Morrison's modifications, enhanced shields designed to operate in the nebula's interference fields, weapons systems configured to exploit Void Hunter weaknesses, and, most importantly, crews trained in the suicidal tactics necessary to fight an enemy that outclassed them in every conventional measure. Captain Boss, the flagship's commanding officer, looked up from his sensor station with grim satisfaction. Princess, we're reading massive energy signatures dead ahead.
The enemy fleet is exactly where Morrison predicted.
Through the viewport, the first Void Hunter ships came into view, sleek predators that seemed to absorb light itself, moving through space with the fluid grace of living things. But these weren't the small raiding craft Zara had encountered during her rescue. These were the dreadnoughts Morrison had warned about, massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the Council fleet.
"Sweet mother of stars," whispered Lieutenant Kava from the weapons station. "How many of those things are there?"
The answer came from Morrison himself, his modified mining ship appearing on their starboard flank like a ghost materializing from the nebula's exotic matter. Sensor count shows 312 vessels, including 27 dreadnoughts.
The good news is they're concentrated for the invasion jump.
The bad news is we've got about 30 minutes before they finish their preparations. Princess Zara activated the fleet-wide communication channel, her voice carrying to every ship in the task force.
"All vessels, this is Princess Zara.
Today we stand between the darkness and the light.
We may be outnumbered, we may be outgunned, but we are not alone.
Every being in this fleet chose to be here, chose to fight for something greater than themselves." She paused, thinking of all the worlds that hung in the balance, all the families who would live or die based on what happened in the next hour.
Sergeant Morrison has shown us that courage and determination can overcome any technological advantage.
Today we prove that heroes come in all forms, from all worlds, united by a single truth: we do not abandon those who need our protection.
Task Force, execute Operation Shieldbreaker.
The attack began with Morrison's ship diving straight toward the nearest dreadnought, its modified weapons blazing with energy that made the void itself burn. Following his lead, the task force scattered into the battle formation he had drilled into them, small groups of ships that moved like schools of fish, striking fast and hard before dancing away from the enemy's overwhelming return fire. Zara watched from her command chair as the battle unfolded across the tactical display. Morrison had been right about the Void Hunters' weaknesses. Their superior technology made them overconfident, and their precise coordination became a liability when faced with enemies that refused to fight according to predicted patterns. The first dreadnought staggered under concentrated fire from 6 different directions, its shields collapsing as the task force exploited blind spots in its defensive grid. But the victory came at a price. 2 of the attacking ships were vaporized by return fire that turned space itself into a weapon. Target their command ships, Morrison's voice cut through the chaos of battle. The smaller vessels are controlled by central coordination. Break that link and they become sitting ducks. The flagship's weapons officer, a veteran Kytherian with combat experience dating back 3 decades, looked up at Princess Zara with something approaching awe. Your Highness, his tactical analysis is perfect. The enemy formation is already showing signs of confusion. Through the viewport, Zara could see the truth of that statement. Void Hunter ships that had moved with perfect synchronization were now colliding with each other, their formation dissolving as individual captains tried to respond to attacks coming from impossible angles. But the enemy was adapting, and their adaptation was terrifying. The remaining dreadnoughts began to spread out, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned sections of space into killing zones. Worse, their harvesting ships were moving toward the task force vessels, seeking to replenish their energy reserves by draining the life from captured crews. Princess, Captain Voss called urgently, were reading energy drain signatures from the Terran frigate Defiance. They're being harvested. On the tactical display, the friendly contact was flickering as something fundamental was being torn away from the ship and its crew. The Defiance was one of Morrison's original volunteers, a crew that had followed him into hell without hesitation. All ships, Morrison's voice came through the communication system, carrying a note of controlled fury. Priority target is the harvesting ship attacking Defiance. Converge and destroy, maximum burn. What happened next became legend in the tactical schools of a dozen species. 7 ships from across the galaxy, human, Kytherian, Centauran, and others, abandoned their own safety to race toward a single enemy vessel. Their combined firepower struck the Void Hunter harvester with such concentrated violence that the ship simply ceased to exist, taking its stolen energy with it. The Defiance was saved, but barely. Half her crew was in medical stasis, their life force partially drained but still recoverable. It was a reminder of what would happen to entire worlds if the invasion fleet reached its targets. Morrison, Princess Zara called over the communication channel, "What's our status on the primary objective?" "Their invasion formation is broken," came the reply, his voice tight with exhaustion. "But, Princess, we've got a problem. They're not retreating, they're regrouping for a different kind of attack. Something I haven't seen before." The tactical display shifted as the remaining Void Hunter ships formed a spherical formation around their largest dreadnought. Energy began to build at the center of the sphere, creating a distortion in space that made Zara's eyes water to look at directly. "Energy signature is off the scales," Captain Voss reported. "Whatever they're charging, it's drawing power from every ship in their fleet." Morrison's modified mining ship appeared alongside the flagship, its hull scarred by weapons fire but still fighting. Through the communication channel, his voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. "Princess, I've seen energy signatures like this once before. They're preparing to punch a hole through space itself, create a corridor that bypasses our defenses and puts them directly into the core systems. If that thing activates, the invasion continues without the delay we bought," Zara finished. "How do we stop it?" "Someone has to get close enough to disrupt the energy buildup from the inside. The interference field will destroy any ship that enters it, but..." Morrison's pause was heavy with implication. "But it might work if the ship was already damaged enough that the field couldn't make it any worse," Princess Zara said, understanding his plan immediately. "Jake, you're talking about suicide." "I'm talking about finishing the job," Morrison replied. "Your Highness, it's been an honor serving beside you. Take care of the survivors, and make sure the Council understands what we learned here today." Morrison's ship began its final run toward the enemy formation, its engines burning with such intensity that they left a trail of fire across the nebula. But, before he could reach the target, Princess Zara's voice cut across all frequencies with royal authority that demanded obedience. "Jake Morrison, you stand down immediately. That's a direct order from your commanding officer."
Princess, what are you? I'm pulling rank, Sergeant. And, I'm going in your place. She turned to Captain Voss, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was ordering. Captain, prepare the flagship for ramming speed. All non-essential personnel to the escape pods immediately. Your Highness, I cannot allow. You can and you will, Captain. The flagship has the mass and shielding to penetrate their formation where smaller ships would be destroyed immediately. Sometimes leadership means being first through the door. The bridge erupted in protest from her crew, but Zara's decision was absolute. As the escape pods launched toward friendly ships, she remained at the command station with a skeleton crew of volunteers who refused to abandon their princess. Morrison's voice came through the communication system one final time, heavy with respect and regret. Princess Zara, you're either the bravest person I've ever met or the craziest. Either way, it's been an honor. The honor was mine, Jake. Thank you for showing the galaxy what humanity really means. The flagship began its final approach toward the Void Hunter formation, its engines pushed beyond their design limits. Through the viewport, Zara could see the enemy vessels trying to adjust their targeting, but they were committed to their weapon charging sequence and couldn't break formation without losing the energy they had built. As the ship entered the distortion field, reality began to break down around them. The hull screamed under stresses that violated the laws of physics, and the crew fought to maintain control as their instruments went insane. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that billions of lives hung in the balance. At the last second, Princess Zara activated the ship's emergency transmitter, broadcasting on all frequencies with her final message to the galaxy. Mother, I'm alive because of him, because Jake Morrison showed me that courage isn't about having the best weapons or the strongest ships. It's about standing up when someone needs you, regardless of the cost. I'm alive because he taught me what it means to be a hero. The flagship struck the enemy formation center with the force of a small star going nova. The resulting explosion tore a hole in space that swallowed the Void Hunter superweapon and half their fleet. The surviving enemy ships, their coordination shattered and their invasion plans ruined, retreated into the depths of the nebula to lick their wounds. Jake Morrison survived to coordinate the rescue operations that followed, pulling survivors from the wreckage and ensuring that Princess Zara's sacrifice would be remembered properly. The official casualty report listed 37 ships destroyed and nearly 4,000 beings killed or missing. But the real casualty list was much shorter. It contained only heroes. The memorial service was held on Kytheria Prime 3 months later, when the immediate crisis had passed and the galaxy had time to properly honor its dead. Empress Mira stood before representatives from every species in the council, her voice carrying across the crystal amphitheater where her daughter had once presented Morrison's intelligence. They came from different worlds, spoke different languages, followed different customs, she said, her words carried to every inhabited planet by quantum communication relays. But they shared a single truth, that some things are worth dying for, and some people are worth saving, regardless of the cost. Behind her, a holographic display showed the faces of every being who had volunteered for Operation Shieldbreaker. At the center, larger than the rest, were two images, Princess Zara of House Altair, and Sergeant Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Corps. My daughter lives because a human soldier refused to abandon someone in need, Empress Mira continued. And billions of beings across the galaxy live today because both of them refused to abandon hope when all logic said to surrender. The ceremony ended with the dedication of a new star chart, officially renaming the Crimson Nebula to the Morrison Altair Memorial Zone. It would serve as a permanent reminder that heroes come in all forms, from all worlds, and that sometimes the greatest strength is found in the most unexpected places. Jake Morrison stood in the crowd that day, wearing a new uniform with ranks and decorations that reflected his elevation to the Council's highest military honors. But he wasn't looking at the ceremonies or listening to the speeches. His attention was focused on the small data pad in his hands, which showed the current status of refugee resettlement operations across the galaxy. Princess Zara had asked him to take care of the survivors. He intended to spend the rest of his life keeping that promise. Years later, when military academies taught courses on the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, they would emphasize the tactical innovations and strategic implications of humanity's first major contribution to galactic defense. But they would always begin with the same lesson, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear determine your actions. And, in the quiet moments when veteran officers gathered to share war stories, they would speak of the princess who died like a soldier and the soldier who lived like a prince, and how together they proved that heroism isn't about where you come from or what technology you possess. It's about standing up when someone needs you, regardless of the cost.
That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not their weapons or their ships, but their absolute refusal to abandon those who needed protection. It was a gift that would echo across the stars for generations to come, ensuring that the names Morrison and Altair would never be forgotten. And, in the depths of space, where human colonies continued to expand into the unknown, children would grow up hearing the story of the princess and the soldier, learning that heroism isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. Sometimes, it's just about being there when it matters most.